Hey, what's up? You're listening to Rise Up with your girl Vita Guerra, and I have my co-host Katie Yoring.
Hi, everybody. Excited to be here as always. Today we're going to be talking about forgiveness, but before we dive into that, I want to let our guests introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Abigail Makepeace. I'm an actress and a therapist. I have a private practice in Los Angeles, and I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming back.
Thank you.
This is J-Dub. This is my third time on the show.
Regular.
Thank you guys for having me again. Looking forward to today's topic. I am a DJ, producer, and philanthropist.
So where can they find you?
Everyone can find me on all social media handles at William Lifestyle with no E at the end.
Nice.
All right. So today we are going to be talking about forgiveness, which is a very important topic. One that I think a lot of people don't consider as being important in life or have it a little bit twisted. Mm-hmm. So Abby.
Hi.
From a clinical/life standpoint, What do we think about forgiveness?
Forgiveness is huge. It's huge. It's one of the hardest things to do. Mm-hmm. And working as a therapist, I have so many clients that come in wanting to work on forgiveness. People come in wanting to talk about, trauma they had in their childhood and how that's affecting them now as adults. Or maybe I'm working with a couple where, there was infidelity in the relationship and they want to learn how to forgive. So forgiveness is really, really big. And I think that a lot of people struggle with it because they don't fully understand that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting.
Yes.
It's not a denial of what happened. It doesn't diminish what occurred. And it's not a weakness either, right?
Right.
And also, it doesn't involve the other person necessarily even needing to apologize. And that's a big thing. People will say, well, I can't forgive that person because they didn't say they were sorry. Or I don't believe that they were really sorry.
Right.
And, you're not, then at that point, you're doing it for them. And you're not doing it for them, you're doing it for yourself. So, what do you do if somebody has passed away and you need to forgive that person?
So I think that's what you just touched on is when it comes to forgiveness for me, I never realized that forgiveness is actually a gift to yourself.
Right.
For a very long time. I always thought that it was this sort of external thing where you're sort of gifting something to somebody or letting them
Get
off the hook or whatever.
Right.
But really it's about letting go of the weight, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's this famous quote that probably everybody's heard at this point by James McDonald where he said, withholding forgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Yes, that is so true.
So true.
Yeah. I mean, you do it for yourself. You don't do it for other people. And it has a lot of health benefits.
Yes, because holding on to that just can manifest in so many different diseases in your body, illnesses.
Yeah. Another quote that I really like is this woman, Brenda Goodman, said, if there was an equivalent to physical exercise, as far as like a mental equivalent to physical exercise, it would be the process of forgiveness.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's a process of letting go of anger, letting go of resentment, letting go of thoughts of revenge. And
Guilt.
And guilt, yeah.
Because sometimes people feel guilty, and then like if someone does pass away, and then they're living with that guilt, which isn't good.
Yeah. And they have found that people that practice forgiveness, that they have less anxiety, less stress, less depression, stronger immune systems, diminished chronic pain. You have healthier relationships, and that's because,
letting go of that.
Yeah, you're not releasing all the stress response. You're not releasing as much, adrenaline and cortisol whenever you're thinking about that anger or, that thing that happened. And if you're like holding on to something from a long time ago, like years, and then you find that you're thinking about that, once or twice a day even.
That's too much.
Yeah.
It's like carrying a suitcase around with so much stuff in it, and you're just going on your day in life and just carrying all this weight for no reason. And like I always say, I forgive, but I don't forget. And then I know where to place someone, you know, because then I understand, like, okay, you know. But giving people the room to make mistakes, but having the compassion, you know, to know that's a big thing, right? Because we're all just learning. There's no blueprint.
Right.
Well, and the other thing is that we also like to hold on to everything that everyone else did so that we can't look at ourselves.
That's a really good point.
So I have two questions. First is for you, Vita. When you said you forgive, but you don't forget, just having that notion and that process, aren't you still kind of not forgiving in a sense, because you're still holding a weight? Because it's like, I'm going to forgive you, which hearing that really makes someone just kind of like almost threatening me in a sense. It's like, I'm going to forgive you, but I ain't going to forget. Like people don't say that, like,
well, I mean,
genuinely. That's like a warning.
I don't tell them that.
Well, but
it's just
you'll
like,
never
it's
forget.
it's my own thought process, right? So I forgive them, but then I know their character and the person that they are, and I know what then I can. It depends on what the scenario is, like what I can trust them with and what I can't trust them with. Now, if I was in a relationship with a person and they cheated on me, I would have to immediately, because I know me, you know, it's taking the time to know me, I would have to, I would forgive them for doing that, because, you know, for whatever reasons they had, I wouldn't forget, because now you kind of destroyed something that we had and we were building. I would end the relationship, you know, immediately.
Right. Well,
because that's how I do.
See, everybody has their thing.
Okay.
I think that when it comes to the forgive and not forget thing or whatever, that then raises the question about the kind of love that you have, right? Is it conditional or unconditional? And also that the forgiveness part is, it's about both people.
Right.
You really have to, you can let go of something and not forget about it. Obviously, you can't erase the past.
Right.
But you can really move forward from something.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of work. And it's not just about forgiving the other person.
I think, you know, that's a great example as far as if someone cheats on you and how do you forgive, but say at the same time, I'm not going to forget. And I think what comes up for me is, you know, a huge part of even being able to forgive someone, like what I do with a lot of my clients, is we look at having compassion for that other person.
Right.
Because when people, whenever someone hurts you, it's because they have a need that they're trying to fill for themselves. Right.
So it has nothing to do with the recipient.
Exactly.
Yes.
It has more so to do with what happened to them that made them need this, whatever it is. And so you can have, you know, that helps with forgiveness, and you can have compassion. You can have love for that person. You can say, okay, I see where you are in your life right now. That doesn't match where I am.
Yes. Right.
So I can forgive you, but if I see that's where you are, and I don't want to be in a relationship where I might, you know, someone might cheat on me again, then I'm not going to forget that. I'm going to learn from that and then make a decision based off of that. So that's where you forgive, but you don't forget.
Gotcha.
I think.
Yeah, that's exactly. You said it better than me. You are a therapist, but you know that's the whole thing. Like if because I just know myself that I wouldn't be able to. You know, I would be playing the story over and over. And then the most important thing to me is peace. And I've done so much work that if I had to be alone, then I'm fine with that.
Gotcha.
You know, and if I'm in a relationship and a person cheats on me, then we're not in the same alignment. We're not in the same vibration. So I can forgive that person because, you know, everyone's human and everyone is going through their own stage. Everyone's going through the journey. We're all getting to the same place, different ways. And I can say, you know, good luck. But I will move on because I have so much self-love and self-worth that I'm not going to be with someone, because then it would always be in the back of your mind. I mean, as I can only speak for myself, but for me, it would always be in the back of my mind, and I couldn't move forward. And then if it starts jeopardizing every single thing in my life, you know, career, other relationships, then it's not. And I always feel like there is someone for everyone, you know, there's that perfect person that's right for you. So I don't know. Well,
and Vita and I talk about this all the time because we disagree on this a lot. I mean, I guess I'm kind of more of a going through the mud with someone type of person.
Right.
And I would never.
I'm not.
Wait, you disagree with there's someone perfect for everyone, or you?
Oh no. I mean, I think there are many people for people.
Yeah.
But infidelity, for example, would not be like a deal breaker for me. For a lot of reasons. I mean, I think that monogamy is a thin string to hang a lifelong relationship on. And I mean, that's a whole other topic. But in terms of forgiveness, you know, I know I'm not perfect. So for me to have an expectation that anyone, much less someone that I'm trying to do life with, would be, to me, is an unrealistic expectation.
Well, I mean, expectations are not really good because that reduces the joy in life. But having the self-love and self-worth of yourself to be like, if someone doesn't, I think a relationship every day you have to work at it, and the minute you stop working at it is the minute that it starts dying.
I agree, but I also don't think that cheating equals not working at it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's complicated.
Yeah, I think it's a
there's not a
case.
perfect answer for that. Like, granted, the ideal of marriage, it's a grand idea. And unfortunately, it's kind of like an idea that has, I think it's weakened over the course of generations. Like, back in the days, like our grandparents, marriage was the only thing. Infidelity, granted, it happened, but it wasn't even identified as that.
But it was for survival.
Exactly.
It wasn't for, that's really what it was about. You were surviving. And there was no Instagram.
Yeah. And I think now like the most harmful part of infidelities in relationship is that it's viewed by so many eyes now. It's not such a intimate, personal thing. And there's so many narratives that get attached to it from other people's interpretations. Whereas majority of the time when infidelities do take place, it honestly has nothing to do emotionally. Majority of it is just physical.
For men.
I was just going to say for men.
For men.
Not for women, for men.
If your girl is cheating on you, you have big problems. But that's why, to me, like, expectations, you have to be realistic about it. Right? In my opinion, a man can cheat or do whatever and literally never think about it again.
It doesn't impact
anything. Yeah. It's just literally like an urge, feeling the urge and moving on with life. It has nothing to do with, does this person love me? Does this person this? Does this person that? With women, I think it's a little deeper than that. What do you think, Abby?
You know, we kind of talked about this when we talked about monogamy in 2018. And, you know, we talked about how there are some people that have a predisposition towards monogamy. There's some people that it just comes naturally to, and it is based on the genes. We talked about, you know, how the hormone's called vasopressin, and that is what keeps, you know, men faithful to a certain extent. And so I think that, you know, that it was for survival, you know, that when you have somebody who is like your person, that person is going to make sure that if you're in trouble, they're going to protect you. If you're hungry, they're going to feed you.
Yeah.
And so it kind of evolved from that, you know?
I mean, I also think when we're talking about monogamy, and then we can get back to the forgiveness thing, but like, you can have a person and that can be your person, but it can still be your person if that person sleeps with somebody else. You can still be your person.
I mean, a lot of people don't feel that way. And you have to think about why. Like, what does the feeling of jealousy that comes up when you think about sharing your partner, what does that serve? Because even for, like, you know, even if men cheat and they know that it's just physical, men are not going to be comfortable with their woman cheating if they think, oh, that's just physical. They're not going to be like, oh, that's okay. You know what I mean?
All right, we agree on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Do as I say, not as I do.
You know, exactly. And so we have to think about, like, what does it serve? You know, because if we were really just a generation of like, well, men just cheat or people just cheat, we'd be like, all right, cool, I'm cool with that. But most people are not cool with that.
But that's why the communication and being realistic about the differences in gender, everyone's preferences, there's all these variables that come into a relationship. The way that our society and culture is set up is this one ideal of walk down the aisle in a white dress and it's so romantic, and I'm going to say these vows about how you're going to be my only person for all of eternity. And meanwhile, we have bachelor and bachelorette parties where it's like, I'm going to prison next week, so let me get in before that happens. It's a contradictory concept. And I think that, yes, it's cool to have these ideals, and yeah, it would be great if everything was perfect and we lived happily ever after and we didn't have these thoughts of other people and we didn't have social media and we didn't have options running past us all the time, no matter what gender you are. But we don't really ever talk about that. We just make this assumption like, okay, I'm going to be in a relationship or I'm not. And there's not really a gray area when it's so gray.
Well, I think communication is definitely key when you're establishing a relationship with someone, right? And you're trying to get down to the bottom. It's like, well, have you cheated in the past? Yes. Have you? Why? What prompted you to cheat? You know, is that something that is a habit of yours to do? Because if you look down, there is an underlying factor that is causing that, right?
Right.
They're not feeling good enough, so they can self-sabotage themselves in a way where it can show in relationships in all areas of life, right?
That could be part of it. It could be that you are self-sabotaging, but it also could be that you're just not
that
really
into the person.
No.
Please.
Not. I mean, that could also be it, but it could also be that you just are not for monogamy.
Yeah, like I'm for monogamy.
like a person could not be essentially good at it.
Yeah.
You know?
When I was young, I cheated, and then that's it. You know, like, I mean, we're talking about 18 years old, but that's it, you know, and it doesn't make the other person feel good. So I never do it again. And if I can't be in a relationship where I can be monogamous, then I wouldn't be in a relationship.
Right.
But I think that's the main thing about when you're first getting to know someone and establishing your boundaries and what you like and don't like, right?
Or just what you stand for. So, I mean, I think honesty, like you said, Katie, is key. Like, people are, like, we're not having those conversations. We're not being honest. And so, you know, it's not even for me to have judgment on someone else to say, hey, you don't like monogamy. What's wrong with you? It has nothing to do with that. It's about just saying, well, what are your rules for relationship? And let me see if, like, what my rules are work with that. But if we're both being deceitful and you're like, well, you know, I want to be with you and only you, but
I
you're
don't.
not. Right. Yeah. So
when people come in to see you,
yeah,
and some sort of something, infidelity, lying, whatever, has taken place, and they're looking for forgiveness, or are they? Or, I mean, how do you sort of take them down that path to get
add
past
to that question before you do answer?
Yeah.
The percentage of people that come in and ask you for forgiveness, is that even something that they're even considering, or is it literally they're coming in there to talk about these problems and you decipher it's like these people actually need to focus on forgiving one another or forgiving something in their past?
Okay, so specifically, do you mean to infidelity, or do you mean just
in general, like in a relationship?
Yeah.
Whether it's fidelity, whether it's lying, whether it's, you know.
Well, when I'm working with, like, couples, when they come in, they both usually have a pretty good idea of who needs to apologize.
Yeah.
And it's usually the other one.
person.
Right.
It's their fault.
So, I mean, largely what I do, and I love working with couples, is I really try to normalize how the other person is feeling, you know? And I get them to try to see the other person's point of view. And then we go back to the idea of compassion. And it's very quick that when someone else is able to say, okay, well, the reason that you hurt me was because you felt that when I did that, I was treating you the same way that your mom treated your dad, for example. And the other person's like, oh my God, I didn't know that. I'm so sorry, right? But yeah, people don't usually come in saying, I'm here because I need my partner to forgive me. They usually come in saying, I'm here because she did this and he did that. And then I just try to like pick it apart to see how they can just gain understanding. And then we just work on different ways of getting their needs met.
Forgiveness is down the road.
Yeah.
So have you seen a success rate where a couple, let's say there was infidelity and then the person did forgive them and then they had a successful rate moving forward?
Yeah, I see it. I see it a lot, actually, because, you know, infidelity actually happens quite often and people end up seeking therapy because they don't want to give up on their relationship. And, you know, a lot of times, usually when somebody cheats, it has less to do with, you know what, I'm not in love with that person anymore. It usually has to do with your needs aren't being met. And I don't mean that in a sexual way. What I mean is, so, you know, suddenly you're at work and suddenly your coworker is laughing at your jokes, right?
Yep.
And that coworker is suddenly like making you realize, oh, that's right, I'm funny.
Yeah, right.
Right.
The little things.
I'm charming, right? And so when you are in a relationship where you guys are fighting a lot and those qualities in you are not being acknowledged, suddenly, you know, you are at work and those qualities are being acknowledged, and suddenly you're like, oh, I think I have feelings for that person. That person makes me feel really, really good, right? And so when we're working with infidelity, we try, if you're here on my couch, I know it's because you want to work on the relationship,
Right.
not because you want to go be with that person that you cheated on your
Right.
partner with, right? So then we just look at, okay, well, let's see what wasn't working in the relationship and let's try to heal that. We do, of course, need to heal the pain, of course, but in really looking at the source of why it happened, that tends to help the couple heal and move forward where they're able to utilize those tools to make the other person feel acknowledged and feel loved and vice versa.
Okay, so let's take relationships and infidelity and lying out of the conversation and just talk about forgiveness in general. Because I think a lot of times,
Like in friendships or business
just in life,
relationships.
you know, people carry around the weight of all kinds of things, from being abused when they're children to being bullied to being this to being rejected for a job. I mean, it can be any number of things, which it adds up over time.
Right.
So when I'm assuming that people come in with these types of issues that they're carrying around.
That's mostly what people come in with.
Right.
Oh, really? Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, you're not alone.
no, people mostly come in saying, you know, when I was 7, this happened, or
Right.
when I was 13, this happened, and I'm still hurting. I'm still hurting. This is still affecting me. I haven't healed from this. How do I heal from this? You know?
Because see, that's what happens. Like people get into relationships, but they're not still fully healed within themselves of something that happened. So they keep repeating the same patterns over and over.
Or they bring the baggage from
Yeah.
however this person did me wrong or that person and project it onto the new person.
Yeah. I'm actually working on a book right now, which is all about
Nice.
how past trauma affects your relationships. So yeah, that's a huge, huge topic.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
But wait,
Do tell.
before we do talk about that, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Rise Up, and today's topic we're speaking on is forgiveness. So let's tell us about your book.
And about bringing past trauma, which we all do.
Yeah.
That's why I'm laughing about it.
I mean, you're always, well, I'm a psychodynamic therapist, which means that I predominantly look at how your childhood is shaping adulthood. And people partner up, and they oftentimes will partner up with somebody that really hits their wounds.
So sometimes exactly hits their wounds.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll have someone, you'll be like, oh, I don't know if we're compatible because we're so opposite. And I'm thinking, oh, I see why those opposite sides of you actually are why you're together.
Right.
Because technically that is if there is love there, right? That is a space for you to heal those wounds within that relationship, right? To heal your previous...
Or reenact them.
Yeah, I think reenact them, right?
It's both. I mean, you can ultimately heal them, but I think initially what we do is we find people who are similar to our parents or to people who made a lasting impression on us psychologically or emotionally, and we reinforce those beliefs. Yeah. They're either positive or negative.
Right. And a huge one that comes up is, how does abandonment manifest?
Ooh, yes. That's what I had.
Nita's favorite topic.
That's my favorite topic.
Well, that's the one that comes up almost
all the time,
right?
Yeah,
because, people, especially if you feel abandonment due to your parents. So, you have...
And it could be something silly.
Yeah.
Like mine was.
But it wasn't at the time.
It wasn't at the time. And I carried it on for all these years. At 44, it was like when I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
So it wasn't silly.
Yeah.
But it is silly if you really think about it.
Well,
but not to a 7-year-old.
No. That's why you have to kind of talk to your younger self.
Right.
And be like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Those are the tools, right?
Yeah. So abandonment shows up a lot, and people react to abandonment differently. So you'll have someone, okay, let's say there's two people and they both have abandonment issues, right? There might be one person who reacts by saying, we need to spend all of our time together. Why are you leaving town? You don't love me. And just kind of chasing after the other person.
Overcompensate.
Yeah. And then another person who has abandonment might just
peace out.
Yeah, as soon as they feel not safe in their relationship, they just shut down. I will no longer feel this. And so what happens, right, if you get two people that both have abandonment, but they process it in those two opposite ways, then you have, whenever I'm hurting, I want to talk to him, but all he does is shut down and walk away. He doesn't love me. That's an example. And so that's one of the things that I talk about in the book, about how childhood trauma can show up in relationships and how it acts. It kind of reveals itself, and how there's a lot of potential for healing through relationships.
But it requires work.
A lot of inner work.
And forgiveness.
Right.
So the process of forgiving, I know it's not just acknowledging the issue or acknowledging where the stem of your problem is. It's not just a one-time deal. So
right.
It takes a long time. Well, granted, is there a time frame for it? And two, is there certain steps that for your clients, for your patients, that you guide them to do?
Yeah. So, it's amazing that some people just are better at it than others. Some people are just, okay, I'm just going to forgive that person. And they really just are able to just move along. But for most people, including myself, forgiveness takes a lot of work. So when I'm working with my clients, and again, it is a process. When we just talked earlier about how they compared it to physical exercise, and it's basically a commitment that you're making. So what I usually do is I start off by just, we accept that it happened. So we just sit down and okay, let's sit with this pain. And I really normalize the pain that they're feeling. I really normalize it for them, and we sit with the anger, and they are able to fully feel it. Okay, so we've accepted it. The other thing that we do, which can be a little bit tricky, but we really recognize how this experience has actually benefited you. So what have you gained from this?
The gift in the...
Yeah, so has it made you a stronger person, a more resilient person? Do you have more empathy? Has it shaped you in a way that moved you, for example, towards your career choice? Who knows,
The silver lining.
And then the overall thing, which I think is the most important thing, which I mentioned earlier, is basically having compassion for that other person. So really looking at, what need were they trying to have met when they did the thing that hurt you?
Right.
And when you're able to do that, it usually helps. But then, again, you're just making a commitment to yourself that your goal, when you say, I want to forgive this person, I don't know how, we always go back to, what does it mean to forgive? It means that you are making commitment to yourself, that you're going to let go of anger, not that you're going to deny that it happened, that you're going to let go of resentment, not that you're going to dismiss it or forget it, right? That you're just not going to think about revenge,
Yeah.
right? And something that's really, really interesting is that when you are, when you're thinking of anger, when you're having anger and vengeance, you're actually inhibiting rational thought, because it's the parts of your brain that light up are the amygdala, and that is where your fight or flight is.
Right.
Yeah,
Fight or
so
flight.
it's chaos.
Right.
Survive.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so when you start to, go through the process of forgiveness, you're utilizing the more recently evolved parts of the brain, and so that, like the prefrontal cortex, and that those parts govern problem solving, morality, understanding, reading the mental states of others, having cognitive control of emotions. And that's really important. You have to have control of emotions so that you can, not react in an impulsive way to rage, for example. So,
Can you elaborate a little bit more on what that actually means in terms of the anger part and the fight or flight thing? Because I think people don't recognize. I mean, I don't even really think about it in that way.
right.
When it comes to anger and how irrational
Yeah.
you could
thinking
possibly
is.
be.
Right. Well, it's almost like you get possessed,
Right.
Think about it. When you get scared and you have that moment of like, oh my God, do I fight or do I run? That is an old part of the brain completely designed just to protect you, and it has to shut off other parts. Okay. So you're not
Right.
thinking rationally. You're just thinking, how do I get out of this situation?
Gotcha.
Right. And so that is what you're triggering. And there is a huge mind-body connection. I mean, this cannot be disputed at this point, right?
No.
So
Absolutely not.
there's a huge mind-body connection. And, going back to forgiveness, this reminds me of when they first started to study the science of forgiveness. There was a doctor, Dr. Ewan, I don't remember, but he was a doctor and he treated burn victims. And so he knew that if somebody came in to see him and they just got burned, that if he could get them to focus on forgiveness, that they would heal much, much faster. Because usually people that would come in, they would be so angry and devastated. And, we're talking about people who might need to have, limbs amputated.
Right.
And so they would come in with their story that person did this and they did that. And they're filled with pain and rage. And he would say, okay, look, right now we need to switch. We need to get your mind to stop thinking about that and to focus on healing. We need to switch it up. And he would give them the example of saying, well, if you feel embarrassment, you blush. So there's an example of mind, body, and that would just get them to think, okay, all right, I get that. And then they would kind of switch over to thinking about forgiveness. And while he's getting them to think about forgiveness, he knew that if he could do that while he's working on a skin graft, that the skin graft would take.
Right. There would be less resistance.
Yep.
That's interesting.
I think it's interesting when we went and Vita and I went and did this Vipassana for 12 days of meditation.
Silent.
And part of the philosophy of that is this idea that everything is a sensation, every emotion, every thought, and then actual, every feeling that you have physically. And when you think about it, emotions are actually all the same feeling. When you have that feeling in the pit of your stomach, sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's anxiety, sometimes it's excitement, sometimes it's happiness. The context of it is how we label it, but when it really comes down to it, it's the same feeling.
Well, for instance, remember what happened to me in February? where I was really angry at someone that wasted my time. I had gone out.
I do remember.
I had gone out with this guy, and he wasted my time. From the minute, I mean, the day I was like, check please, and I should have just stuck with that, but I didn't. And by the third time that we went out, he was telling me, oh my God, you're such a great person, but I'm just not ready. I know you deserve this and that, whatever. Okay, so that night I was running because it was freezing here in Los Angeles, believe it or not, and I had my dog in my hand, and I was running back home, and I trip over the sidewalk, and I go flying in the air. I have my little 3-pound dog that I don't want her to get hurt because she would get hurt. So I fall incorrectly. I have this pain in my knee for about a month, right? It was like a month and a half. I couldn't even work out. I couldn't do anything. And I was so angry. And I knew that it manifested from being angry about wasting time. And it was wasting time in like a relationship sense. And then it was wasting time in a business thing that I was doing that I had, put so much time and effort into it. And then nothing happened. And it was kind of like both things were kind of teaching me about my own self-worth.
Right.
And then it wasn't until like I totally forgave that, and I was like, no, like this stops here. Then all of a sudden, miraculously, my pain went away in my knee. Everything went away, and I was just like, wow.
Right.
But most people they're not aware of that, and it is so important.
Right.
Even like when I was 17 years old, 1991, I was in a car accident, and it was a really bad car accident. I ended up getting 30 stitches on the side of my head.
Oh, wow.
And how that manifested for me, because I'm always observing, just because I know myself, right, and observing everything. I was a junior in high school, and it was senior hooky day, and I was like a goody two shoe, and I was like lying to my parents. I was cutting in school. I had a boyfriend, my first boyfriend, and we had a fight. I don't even remember what it was. And then there was an incident that happened 3 months prior where this girl that I knew was fighting with this other girl that I knew, and she was friends with like all these like big girls, and there was like 50 of them, and my boyfriend was dropping me off at school, and they're like, oh, that's one of them. Let's cut up her pretty little face.
Oh, wow.
So look, that kind of just stood in my mind in the back of my mind, right?
Wow.
So then when this accident happened on May 31st, this was March when that happened, it was like all recipe for that, right? So I was feeling guilty for lying to my parents. I was having an argument with my boyfriend, and then that thought was in the back of my mind. And then boom, I go on this trip, and then I get into a car accident and never make the trip. And then, I have like 30 stitches. Then I feel like I look like a monster. My face was all crazy. But that's the thing that I always tell people, like holding on to, we're talking about forgiveness, holding on to anger or resentment or any of those lower vibrations will ultimately, they're there, right? So it's like it's the perfect recipe for when you have other things. And just think about it in an energetic standpoint. That then it'll manifest for you in whichever way it's gonna manifest for you.
Yeah, that's huge. You're talking about how powerful the mind is, essentially. I do want to say one thing though that I think is really, really important, because we've spent, at least I know I've spent a lot of time talking about the importance of forgiveness and like how I work with clients. But I think there is one exception. And the one exception is when you're dealing with sexual abuse.
Yeah.
Right.
So, for people who've experienced sexual abuse, there tends to be a lot of shame, feelings of guilt. You also may have the experience of thinking that if you share this information, no one will believe you, or have the experience of sharing it and not being believed. So with people who have experienced sexual abuse, we don't really focus on, you need to forgive, because it can be very, very empowering to say to someone, you don't have to forgive that person. And also if you believe that in order to forgive, you have to reconcile. I don't believe that. But if you do, you can imagine saying to someone who experienced sexual abuse that part of your healing process is to reconcile with, the perpetrator. So
but that's a case by case basis.
No.
Right. So I just wanted to make sure that I threw that out because, I do work a lot with forgiveness, but it's very different when you're dealing with sexual abuse.
Why is it so different?
Because
besides the obvious.
Well, no, because of some of the stuff I just said, as far as, feeling shame and people who have experienced sexual abuse are looking to get their power back. And so it is empowering to say the choice is yours. Once upon a time, the choice wasn't yours, but now you have this choice, and you can make the choice that you do not have to forgive that person.
So, I think the other thing too, along with the shame thing, is the responsibility factor, because a lot of times people feel like they're responsible for the abuse that happens to them,
right?
Or because it's a really broad spectrum of things that can happen. Right. Especially, it's overly complicated when there's a person who is either a perceived loving person in your life, not just some random rapist, not to dismiss that, but that's just a totally different circumstance altogether.
Right.
But even then, I think a lot of people kind of feel this sense of responsibility, like, oh, if I wasn't there, or if I didn't do this, or what did I do to make this happen to me, those kinds of things.
And that's a lot of times where the feelings of shame come from.
Right.
Yeah, that's very huge.
So I have, it's sad to say this, meaning that it just happens so often, but I have a few female friends that were sexually abused. And, we all have like that friend that you have like a safe place. You feel safe. And fortunately enough, they've been safe to share their stories with me. And the saddest part about, or the most unfortunate part, let me correct myself. The most unfortunate part about the thing is that they beat themselves up for years. And I have seen the relationships of men that they've gone with who they don't sexually abuse them, but emotionally, they kind of like take away their confidence. Like they see that weakness, and they take advantage of it. And I've talked to like my female friends about that, and like, yo, you need to acknowledge what happens. Like, we're never gonna let that go, because that has just molded you to the woman that you've come out to be. And I try to like reinforce like how beautiful they are, how successful they are, and how much more they have to offer. But it never ends up being enough.
Right.
And I think a big portion of that, which I actually never really like identified with them, is that forgiveness element. But like you said, when it comes to sexual abuse, that's a way different type of forgiveness. If I'm just pissed at you for like 2 years because you fired me on some bullshit, how do you guide someone like that, and from a friend to a friend,
in terms of helping them with their healing?
Such a journey.
Yeah,
it's complicated.
Send them to me for therapy. No, I mean, it's hard. It's really, really hard. It's a journey. And, again, for some people that have experienced sexual abuse, working on forgiveness is helpful. But for some, it's not.
Yeah.
And that's, I think in general, forgiveness is great, but with one caveat, that it may not be good for all people who've experienced sexual abuse. But, you really, as a friend, you can love them and support them and try to point them to the right resources.
Right.
But, it takes a while to heal and to see. And again, people they gravitate towards things that, what I find a lot is I'll have clients that will say, oh, my father was abusive and I'm never going to be with somebody who's abusive. And then they end up with somebody who's abusive, right? And that's because it's familiar.
Right.
It's because they know that I lived through that and I survived it, so I can survive it again. And they just gravitate towards it. Yeah.
Well, and it feels in some way, even though when you look at it logically, it is the opposite.
Like home.
Exactly. And so the fear of the unknown or the vulnerability is way crazier than the fear of automatic disappointment or pain or whatever, as long as it comes in a familiar package.
Right. Absolutely. And until that person evolves, what's that quote that a problem will keep presenting itself to you until you learn the lesson?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so until you heal that part of you, you're gonna be attracted to the type of person that keeps inflicting those wounds.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And so when you heal and you get to that next level in your journey, then those people don't serve that purpose in your life anymore.
Yeah.
You don't even see them.
I think it's because they feel their self-worth. It has a lot to do with their self-worth and how they see themselves, and that's why they keep attracting that, because it's happened to me.
Or lack of self-worth.
Yeah, lack of self-worth. And then you just you keep attracting crap because you feel like crap.
It's a label.
I can only speak for myself. That's happened to me twice.
But now, did you attract it or did you seek it out?
No, I think
Thought it out.
I sought it out.
I mean, you don't think that you're actively seeking it out, but you are, because what you eliminate is everything but that. So essentially, it's like the trying but not trying thing. You're not able to see the alternative, so all you see is that. So that's what you're attracting, because that's what you see, that's what you entertain, that's what you do.
Not your subconscious versus your conscious.
Yeah,
definitely.
It's crazy, and you don't even know when you're on the hamster wheel. You just keep going and keep going and keep going, and I think life has to knock you down a couple of times for you to then say, like, this isn't working out, and then start figuring out why,
Right.
and then get down to the why, right, and then from there accepting what has happened, and then choosing to create something different for yourself, right?
And the work is ongoing. I think sometimes people don't understand that there isn't just one solution that appears one day and you're
good
healed,
to go.
because your behavior, it's programmed into your mind. You have this instinct to do it
For many, many years.
Yeah, and it can be anything from an addiction to the type of relationship that you're in to the jobs. It's anything. It's an instinct that you follow and follow until you break that cycle. But in order to stay out of it, I think you have to do it daily.
Yeah, it's definitely work. It takes a lot of work. And I see it all the time with, an individual will come in and will work, and then as they evolve and get healthier, suddenly their relationship that they're in doesn't serve a purpose for them anymore, unless their partner is also evolving with them.
Well, and then another thing I think sometimes happens when that sort of transition takes place is that people look for a fight or drama or something to disconnect. I think that's another type of programming that we have, aside from our own issues, that an end to something has to be dramatic and crazy, when growth can just happen. You can outgrow somebody.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be a situation where this person did this thing to me or vice versa. It's just a fact of life and growing. But then sometimes people will do that sort of sabotage thing to create the event that can
Give them way out.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen.
Yeah.
I've done that.
Yeah.
And been on the receiving end of it.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Well, I think it's just like, imagine our minds being like a computer, right? And then we have some type of virus. And until we clear up the virus, then it won't be able to run smoothly, because you're always going to have some kind of problems.
Right. Yeah. I mean, your brain is an organ like any other, like your liver, like your kidneys, and You got to get it functioning right.
Yeah.
You have to work it out.
Yes.
And then on top of doing that work is also then, eating healthier, because the foods do affect our moods and our state
Absolutely.
of being, right?
Absolutely.
And then, creating movement with your body. And then also keeping toxic people around you. That's part of it too, because, like they say, misery loves company. And
Right.
if you're just in that lower state of energy, then it's easier to stay like there than to rise up and do something different.
Right.
Where how I say 21 days to create a new habit, right? So if you're always in the habit of the same drama, the same issues, the same people, it's always the same stories, just different faces, different names, different locations, then you have to see like that program is no longer serving you, and it's time to update your system.
Right.
Yeah. And
Do you think that the forgiveness thing is a muscle that you can do the programming, or are there tools that you give people?
Yeah. It is a muscle. It is something that takes work. It doesn't usually come easy. You have to make the decision. Okay, I am going, by practicing self-love, I commit to forgiving this person, and not for them, for myself. I'm making that commitment. And again, working on the process of forgiveness, literally in working on it, it kind of helps itself, because you're utilizing the part of your brain that is for problem solving, and it allows you to look at someone else differently. But then, I talked earlier about the tools in terms of how we work on looking at accepting the anger, acknowledging how it's helped you in your life, and then having compassion for that person. And then some people will go to the final step of, whether they're going to tell that person that they forgive them or not.
What about if someone isn't sorry?
Right.
for what they've done to you.
Yeah.
Because I think I agree that the compassion part is really important, but we've kind of been talking in the context of this sort of group healing thing,
Right.
where both people are participating in the process.
Right.
What if you're dealing with a situation where either you don't communicate with the person, the person is outwardly unapologetic,
Right.
blames you or whatever?
Yeah. That's one of the things I talked about with my clients. I think I said it a little bit earlier, where I said that forgiveness does not involve the other person needing to apologize.
Right.
And that's huge, because a lot of times, for example, when I'm working with clients who are, who had abuse in their childhood, and their parent is like, well, I don't remember it that way, or you don't know what my childhood was like, so that's, you had it easy compared to what I had. And so that a lot of times people are like, my parent did this, or my boyfriend did this, and etc. And they're dealing with someone who isn't sorry.
Right.
And so at that point, again, we look at it and we say, look, you don't forgive so that person feels better. You're doing it
Right.
for you. So it's actually irrelevant whether that person acknowledges what they did, or whether that person feels sorry or not. It has nothing to do with it. So, once you look at it that way, it's very empowering,
Right.
because you know that, you're doing it for yourself. It's a form of self-love. It's going to improve your health, decrease depression and anxiety, and ultimately make your life much better.
Yeah, and I think that it's definitely the most important. It's a work in progress. We're all a work in progress, right? And we're just trying to figure out and
Do our best.
do our best, right? And I
Yeah.
think it comes with. I think the self-love is definitely the most important. That was our last week's show on self-love, and I think it stems from there. And then to know what your traumas are, right, before getting into relationships, and have an open line of communication and an honesty with the other person.
Right.
And so, like, when we're forgiving people, we're forgiving them not for them, but for ourselves and for our own peace of mind. Because ultimately, if you're constantly thinking about or having anger or any lower emotions based on what someone has done to us, then you're not being present in the moment to create something for yourself for the future.
Right.
And it takes away from you.
Yeah. I mean, another way of looking at it is you can say, well, I'm not going to forgive you. And yeah, I want to hold on to this high blood pressure. And I want to hold on to this anxiety.
Stress.
And I want to hold on to this stress. And I'm okay with the compromised immune system. But as long as, you don't feel like you're off the hook,
Yeah, I'll kill myself.
Exactly.
As long as I'm not feeling like you still have some power over me.
Right. And that's not what it is. And it's once you understand that, it can be the most empowering and most helpful thing you can do for yourself is really getting into a practice of forgiveness.
Yeah. So if you're out there and you're listening, forgive.
Shit, if you're in here and you're listening.
Yeah.
True that. Well, thank you guys for coming on the show.
Yes,
thanks
for having us.
Any last things you want to say?
I want to say honestly, I think this was like one of, if not the best show, because I was a little silent because this was like honestly very. It was therapeutic, but it was very informative. So and it touched on something that I honestly have not forgiven a lot. And just hearing like just the exercise you were talking about, the benefits of doing it, like it seems like such a desirable thing.
Yeah.
That you just overlook.
Yeah.
I thought I had to do other things. So talking about the topic of forgiveness, it's been a great one.
Yeah.
Yay.
A very helpful one. So
thank you
for having me for
guys.
this.
Thank you for coming on the show, and tell everyone where they can find you again.
So my website, abigailmakepeace.com, and yes, Makepeace is actually my last name.
Best name ever.
Better than mine. Mine means war in Spanish. Can't wait to change
but
it.
your other name means life. So.
I know, but it's just such a contradiction.
Yeah. So abigailmakepeace.com. I have a private practice in Los Angeles. And
Awesome.
And a book coming soon.
Yes, and a book coming out soon.
Oh, I can't wait to have you back on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jada.
You can always find me at www.williamlifestyle.com or follow me on every social media platform at William Lifestyle, no E at the end.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to Rise Up. Make sure you tune in every Tuesday at 3 p.m. and 11 p.m. See you next week.